Hello and welcome to the mill. I am your host, Dusty Crane. This week I have a little bit of a head cold, so I'm going to do my very best to get through this with as little bit of slurping as possible. I know that's gross. I won't do that to you. But what I wanted to talk to you about this week is that I read a review this week titled Scythe, the Rise of Fenris, the expansion that fixes nothing, or something to that extent. And kind of a clickbait title, but the implication being, of course, that Scythe requires fixing. And, I can understand that people come to Scythe for different reasons, or maybe they came to Scythe because they thought it was something that it's not. I've heard that argument that I thought I was getting a war game and it wasn't really a war game. So I wanted to kind of approach this from a different angle, from kind of a constructive angle, and let's, retake that word fixes and discuss what the Scythe expansions fix from the base game of Scythe, or what do they add and what do we gain by what we add into our game. So let's start with base game Scythe. It is 1 to 5 players. It is it's almost like a posturing for war and trying to avoid war. It's kind of, bulking up and saying, listen, don't come at me, but if you do come at me, I'm going to be ready for you. That's kind of the feel that I get from Scythe, that it's more about the threat of war than about war itself. And so you're doing what you normally do if you lived in those times where war had ravaged the lands and now you're trying to rebuild. You still have those utilities of war, but you're so tired of it and you don't want to use it. It's there, but you don't want to use it. And so, that 1 to 5 player game is more about posturing, in my opinion. So let's talk about what fixes are provided by the first expansion, which is Invaders from Afar. So what this fixes in Scythe is we get 2 extra players, or 2 extra factions. We get Tagawa and we get Albion, and we finally have all of the bases that are around that base board are occupied. Now we had the Albion territory and we had the Tagawa territory, and they weren't functional. We didn't have any, use for them really. So this not only took Scythe from a 1 to 5 player game to a 1 to 7 player game with the 2 extra factions. It gave us some different, behaviors. Now we have flags. Now we have traps. Now we have factions that aren't landlocked. They can move right from the get-go, but maybe they're limited by speed because they have limitations, and there's ways to make up for it in terms of like how you use those flags and some of those movement options. But you basically, what we fixed was the fact that a 1 to 5 player game became a 1 to 7 player game, and now we had new factions to play. Let's talk about what the Wind Gambit right here, what that fixed in Scythe. And I guess, what we might say that this fixed in Scythe is we added verticality to the board. Now we have airships. Our airships work kind of like our mechs in terms of, maybe one game they can carry resources. Maybe another game they can carry workers. But we also had another unit, another large unit. It adds a lot of presentation to the game. Not only do we have, our leaders and our mechs wandering out on the board, we also have these large airships, and it's just something to behold. But I think if ever there was an addition to Scythe that kind of would make somebody look at the game without knowing what it was and think, man, look at that war game, it was probably the airships. I mean, they look big compared to the other units on the board. They look intimidating. But depending on which tiles you draw, because, the airships, they move on their own, but you draw a passive tile and you draw an aggressive tile, and that kind of dictates how all of the airships in that game work. And there's some variance on maybe you each draw a passive and you each draw an aggressive in what you get there. But, not only do you get these airships that look awesome, you also have a resolutions module. And what that works, or how that works, is there's alternative endgame states. So I know some people have said, the thing about Scythe is like sometimes it ends so abruptly. Somebody gets that 6 star and it's just done. And what those resolution tiles do is they give you, or they fix the game of Scythe by giving you alternative endgame states. So maybe you just are outright playing 20 turns and that's it. Or maybe you're playing to a state where at the end of the board, the factory is going to explode and, take the resources and people and mechs and stuff like that and take that stuff with it. There are multiple different tiles that change how the game of Scythe works. Now, you can go ahead and randomly draw those, or maybe just when you're looking through that resolution module, you go, oh man, I really, really, really like this one. I want to play a quick game of Scythe. I want to know how good I can do in those 20 turns. Then maybe you just always play with that resolution tile. I think it's Doomsday Clock or Countdown. I think it's Doomsday. But you might find a situation that works great for you in your play style, and I would say that is what the Wind Gambit fixes. So now let's talk about this one right here. Let's talk about the expansion that fixes nothing. And I want to stress before I get into this that I keep mentioning that review. There's no hard feelings. This guy, he has his opinions and they're valid. For him, Scythe is not a good game. And that's fine. I don't want anyone going over there and be like, man, I heard what you said. It's nothing like that at all. Like I said, I wanted to talk about more or less what each kind of expansion gives us. Because every once in a while you'll see someone come into the Scythe Facebook group and they'll say, I'm new to Scythe. What do I need to get? Maybe you can point them in this directory or this directory. Wow. I'm a little bit sick. Point them to this video and say, this guy kind of talks about a little bit of what, each expansion brings. So getting to the Scythe, the Rise of Fenris, if you were ever playing Scythe and you thought, and you're looking at the board and Jakob's beautiful art, and you are looking at the mechs and the cards and kind of the stories that the encounter, the encounter cards bring you, you might have been thinking the stories that kind of come to mind. And that's why I really like what Ryan did with this expansion in bringing a campaign. Legacy games were kind of hot and still are, but we're kind of a new-ish thing. And this is not a legacy game. I want to state that right off. But there are changes that happen through the campaign that kind of carry over in terms of your campaign log. So maybe you gain something in a game that helps you later. So, but let's talk about that campaign itself. I loved the story that it brought to the game of Scythe. Now, maybe Scythe is not missing a story for you. Maybe you look at the board and you're like, I like the game, but I don't need to know about the world of 1920 plus. That doesn't interest me. Maybe the campaign piece won't be of interest for you. But there are other modules that are included in the box, and that is also one of the things that I wanted to bring up was that if you don't like the campaign, you don't have to play the campaign. Now, certainly, for me personally, I love the story. I wanted to open those boxes and see the new stuff that's in this box, that's self-contained within. I wanted to kind of encounter those things or find out those things organically as I played the game, new boxes opening and new things being revealed. I love that aspect. But if you're somebody who just wanted to, add these many modules, let's see here, let me turn around here, 11 interchangeable modules. There's a lot in this box for people. Now, let's say one of the things you don't like is I don't like being, at war with the people around my table. We don't like working against each other. Well, there's a co-op mode that's in this box. That might fix Scythe for you. There are different things that people come to Scythe for. Some people want more battle in their games, and there's ways to make that happen within the rules of the expansion. Some people want less battle, but they don't want a co-op. That's also something that this expansion provides. There are, and I'm not going to get into spoilers, I promise you that. There are different ways of changing the game of Scythe to make it more into the type of game that you want it to be. Now, I want to be careful to frame that in that this is not, in my opinion, a way of saying, I don't know what you want. If you want more battle, do this. And maybe I shouldn't have had so much battle, so here, you can try this. It's not throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. It's saying, hey, I've heard you, and I know you like these things, and I know some of you like these things, and I know some of you like these things. It's not about fixing Scythe. It's about making the game of Scythe your own. Now, when we look at the Wind Gambit and we look at the Rise of Fenris, these are things that fans cooked up. Kai with the Wind Gambit and Ryan with the Rise of Fenris. These were fan creations. Now, not everyone wanted a campaign. Cool. Not everybody wanted airships. Cool. You don't have to get those expansions. If these things don't give you more of what you want from the game of Scythe, then, they're optional. The base game of Scythe, anybody who's been playing Scythe Digital Edition, has been experiencing that base game of Scythe, and, thousands of games are being played, and certainly thousands of games are being played with the base game of Scythe. There's nothing wrong with the game of Scythe for me. You may find some issues with it. Some of these expansions may fix those for you, but that doesn't mean that the game needs to be fixed. So let me tell you what I really, really like from each one of these expansions. So for the Invaders from Afar, what I really liked about that was the introduction of these new mechanics, the traps and the flags, and how these factions feel different from each other and from the different factions that were in the core box set. I liked this because I feel like this was the finality or the full realization of Jamie's vision for Scythe. These two things were playing together, the base game and Invaders from Afar. So I felt like that right there this is what Jamie intended. Now, the airships were something that Kai cooked up and that the fans loved, and Jamie looked at it and goes, wow, that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and build that. I like those alternative resolution tiles. Now, I'll fully admit that I don't play with the airships all that often. It's just kind of for my house and the way we play or the game we play. I don't have a game table yet, so it's kind of like a card table, and the wobble and the airships. You want to fall over on my table because I got kids around it, so it's wobbly. It's not a great situation for me. So those resolution tiles for me are my favorite part of that expansion. I like having a different end game rule set. Now, the Rise of Fenris to me is, in my opinion, the most ambitious, because not only are you thinking in terms of what do I do to complete this one game, you're thinking in terms of what am I doing to complete this campaign. But I also like the individual modules too. I like that there's a co-op mode. I like that there is ways to make it your own in terms of, I want more battle, I want less battle, I want to play multiple people with the Automa to fill up that board. I felt, and I know I've said it before, but I felt like the Rise of Fenris was kind of like the final bow for Scythe. Now, I know it's the final expansion in the Scythe expansion trilogy, but like for me, like it really felt like Jamie and Ryan saying, you've been so good to us, and Scythe means so much that we want you to have this toolbox to continue making it your own and continue playing it how you like to play it. It was almost like a Lego kit to me in terms of like, you have these individual blocks, but like some combination of all these modules in the base game, and like whatever it is that makes you happiest to play in this sandbox, we're giving you the means to do this. Like, I feel like that you could probably take some combination of any of these things and make Scythe at once both familiar, but also different enough that it may not be what Jamie originally intended, but it does it for your group. And so the Rise of Fenris to me felt like giving the fans the keys to the kingdom and saying like, all right, it almost feels like in video game parlance, it almost feels like when the developer hands over almost like the engine resources and says, you know, here's the sand kit or the sandbox toolkit editor or whatever it is, and saying like, turn the game into whatever you want. You see these games that are like platformers and now they're racing games, or, you know, it was a balloon shooter and now it's a deep sea exploration game. I mean, it felt like that to me, which didn't feel like saying, I don't know what I'm doing with Scythe. It felt to me like we were saying, or we, like I had anything to do with it. It felt to me like Jamie and Ryan were saying, go and make of it what you want. Obviously, the way they intended for it to be played, the way Jamie intended for it to be played, is right there in the box. You want to know how Kai intended for you to play? It's there in the Wind Gambit. You want to know how Ryan intended for you to play Scythe? It's there in the box. And I think all these things are complementary without fixing anything that's broken. Instead, I see of it being like seasoning and just, you know, adding flavor. And I know that some chefs, you know, like if you go to a fancy restaurant, if you put ketchup on your food, you know, you're probably gonna upset somebody. But like, I don't know, to me, it feels almost like when they're handing you the keys to the kingdom, they trust you with this thing that they've made. And they acknowledge that now it's yours. Now it's ours to do with what we want. And so in my opinion, that's really what I like and what I love about these expansions. If I had to rate them, me personally, in terms of what a new player to Scythe, you know, they have the base game, they love it. Let's start there. Let's not try and say, oh, you got to pick up Scythe. You also need these 3 expansions, realistic resources, get yourself a legendary box. You need a broken token organizer. You got the metal mechs, right? All of these things that really, really just augment this thing that we love. Let's start at the base game. Let's start there. Let's say they have Scythe. They love it. They want more. I think the very first thing you steer them into, particularly if they have the ability to play a large group. But I still think that the first thing you point them to is Invaders from Afar, because you get those 2 extra factions. You have new places to come at it from the board. So for me, that's number 1, Invaders from Afar. For me, the second one I think I would add would probably be the Rise of Fenris, for all the reasons I already mentioned. There's so many modules, so many ways to make Scythe what you want it to be. And I think it's just a great story to begin with, if that's something you're interested in. And then last but not least is the Wind Gambit. I really like those resolution tiles, and you put airships out on the table, you are going to draw attention. You are going to have people that maybe take notice of a board game for the first time, because all of these pieces all together just make a gorgeous tabletop presence. And so, yeah, that's what I wanted to talk to you about this week. It ran a little bit longer than I was expecting, and my voice is starting to go a little bit. But thank you so much for joining me. I hope you will let me know in the comments what you think are maybe the essential expansions, in what order. And yeah, in terms of Stonemaier news this week, we finally got we got a Watch It Played video from Rodney. We got the rule book for the modular board, which looks awesome. We don't have a price point for that yet, but May 29th we will know what that's going to cost. I'm excited about it. If you didn't know, Jamie posted another picture of the other side of the board. The modular board is, you know, double-sided. So if you want to, I think you probably have enough pictures to know all the different combinations, front and back of both boards, the front and back of the boards, the front and back of the tiles. You can check that out. And yeah, that's all I have for you this week. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it more than you know. And just be good to each other. That is what I want to ask this week and every week. If there is an opportunity for you to help someone up, figuratively, literally, it doesn't matter. If you can build someone up, do so. We as a people are pretty broken sometimes, and sometimes the smallest little gesture means the most. So that's all I got for you this week. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye.